Alright folks, here we are back again. Last recap video of Macbeth, scenes 5 through 8. So let's go ahead and jump right in right here. So we have Macbeth, Satan, soldiers, drum and colors, so Macbeth preparing for battle here. Right off the bat. Hang out our banners on the outward walls, the cry is still they come, our castle's strength will laugh a siege to scorn. So he has placed ultimate trust in his castle Dunsinane because of course he's placed ultimate trust in the prophecies of the witches, that Dunsinane won't fall until Birnam Wood comes to it. And so here let them lie till famine and ague eat them up. So he's anticipating a siege. So he's settling in for the long haul right here. Of course, we know that a lot of thanes have abandoned him, that they're not going to fight on his behalf. And so he's kind of the mind of, well, we'll settle in for the siege, we'll wait them out, and we'll beat them when they're worn out. Okay. Till famine and ague eat them up. Were they not forced with those that should be ours? You see what he's saying right here. Those that should be ours, because of course he has a lot of traitors who are turning against him. We might have met them, dareful, beard to beard, and beat them backward home. Because if he had more soldiers that were loyal to him, then he's like, we would just go out from the castle, meet them on the battlefield, and beat them there. But he just doesn't have the numbers to do that. Of course, they have 10,000 men. He has nowhere near that. And so, a cry within a woman. What is that noise? It's the cry of women, my good lord. And then, here we are building up to one of the most famous soliloquies that Shakespeare has ever penned, and probably the most famous one in Macbeth, right up there with the dagger soliloquy from back in Act 2. Well, let's see how this gets set up. I've almost forgot the taste of fears. Of course, that's been the big thing in terms of Macbeth's reliance on these prophecies, is that he is determined to be afraid of nothing and no one. I've almost forgot the taste of fears. The time has been my senses would have cooled to hear a night shriek, and my fell of hair would at dismal treatise rouse and stir as life were in it. Once upon a time, he's basically saying, like, I would have heard screams and shrieks like what I just heard, and it would have made my hair stand up on end. But not anymore. Why? Because I have supped full with horrors. He's seen enough. He's seen so much blood. He's been around so much horrific things that it just doesn't get to him anymore. Direness, familiar to my slaughterous thoughts, cannot once start me. Nothing can really get him going again after everything that he's gone through. Kind of think back to what we heard Macbeth say at the end of Act 3, that I'm stepped in blood so deep that to go back would be as tedious as to go, or like when he kind of reached that point of no return, and he just kept going, wading deeper and deeper and deeper into that ocean of blood. And at this point, he's become just utterly numb to almost everything. And so, now we find out what was going on. Satan comes back and reports the queen, my lord, is dead. And then we come to Macbeth's really famous speech right here. And there's a lot to kind of unpack here. But let's just read it out first and then kind of return back to it just a little bit. She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. This is really the point at which Macbeth loses everything. When his nihilism and hopelessness and the meaninglessness that he senses about his life reaches its zenith at this point. You know, if there was one thing that he was still holding on to, you might say from his old life, it would have been Lady Macbeth. And so there are a variety of ways that this is kind of performed, but let me just kind of give my spin on it right here. So he receives this word: "The queen, my lord, is dead. She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word." Like, well, this is really inconvenient timing for her to die. She should have died hereafter. Like, there would have been a good time to get this kind of news. Like when? Tomorrow. You know, after we kind of start this battle and, you know, when we start to go. And then you can kind of see how his mind starts to wander as he thinks about this. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Because time, of course, just plods on and on and on. Creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time. Just this kind of idea of like, what is the point of life if there's nothing to live for? And what is it? Just a day and another day and another day. It's a tomorrow and another tomorrow and another tomorrow. And if there's no future, then what meaning does the past have? And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. All that yesterday does, all that time's incessant marching does, is just marches you into your grave. Tomorrow, tomorrow. And yesterday is just the path that leads you to your death. Out, out, brief candle. Because it never stays lit for long. And then you can kind of see, he's transitioning into this metaphor here of like a candle. So there's a light going on here that yesterdays have lighted fools. You can kind of think of a lantern, you know, lighting the way to death. And so then the candle is out at that point. And so when the light is out, you know, it's just a shadow. Life's but a walking shadow. There's no real substance there. It's just an illusion of things. And then, of course, Shakespeare, he loves his theater metaphors. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. What is life? It's just a minor character. Life isn't a lead character in anything. It's just someone comes on stage, puts on a little bit of a show, and then you never hear of it anymore. And then we come to kind of the ultimate nihilism here. It is a tale, that is to say, life is a tale told by an idiot. And you can kind of think of what all the implications of who the idiot is. Maybe it's the person living the life. Maybe he is kind of thinking in a grander scale that, like, maybe he has like a divine idiot in mind. Like, what kind of God would make a life that is utterly meaningless? It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury. It's just chaos. But what does it mean? What does it signify? Nothing. It's like the ultimate depressing speech in a lot of ways right here. And so this is kind of where we find Macbeth at this point. Lady Macbeth is dead. And so what meaning does life possess anymore? None, as far as he's concerned. Which begs the question of, okay, well, Macbeth still has this battle that's brewing outside. So what does he choose to do now? And so once Macbeth has reached this new low, this is when he first gets the report that his beliefs about these prophecies about himself are starting to unspool and unwind. So this messenger comes in and gives the report that, as I did stand to my watch upon the hill, I looked toward Burnham, and anon methought the wood began to move, because of course Malcolm's soldiers are carrying these bows of the trees. And so Macbeth is like, well, here it is. Things are starting to go awry for me. So here he comes. If thy speech be sooth, I care not thou dost for me as much. I pull in resolution and begin to doubt the equivocation of the fiend. So now he's like, okay, I'm starting to doubt the fiends. So he's kind of referring back to the witches here, that lies like truth. It's interesting that a lot of what he says in this particular bit of dialogue kind of echoes what Banquo said way, way, way back in Act 1 about how, you know, the witches might, lure with, how's he put it, with trifles, with honest trifles and truths to betray us in deepest consequence. That's kind of what Macbeth is getting at here. Fear not till Birnam wood come to Dunsinane, and now a wood comes towards Dunsinane. So arm, and out. If this which he apouches disappear, there is nor flying hence, nor tarrying here. So this is kind of important right here, because he's saying, well, if this is true, then we can't fly, we can't retreat, we can't run away, and it doesn't do any good to just stay here in the castle and work out the siege, because they'll win. And so he kind of is faced with this thing. He can't retreat and he can't stay. So what's he going to do? Well, we're going to go out and we're going to fight. And so we see this here at the end. And wish the estate to the world were now undone. I begin to weary of the sun and wish the estate of the world were now undone. He's kind of starting to wish it were just all over. Ring the alarm bell, blow wind, come rack. At least we'll die with harness on our back. Harness would be like armor or, weaponry. And so he's kind of the mind of, well, we can't run away, can't stay here. Might as well just go out to the battlefield. Hey, if I'm going to lose, I'm going to go out on top as best I can. And I'm going to take as many down with me as possible. Because once again, he stepped in so far into blood, can't turn back. Might as well shed some more before he's done. On to scene 6. Okay. Malcolm arrives. They show up. All right, let's throw away our bows. Let's get ready to go in and fight. And that's about all there is to scene 6. Let's go on to scene 7. All right. So, scene 7, enter Macbeth. They have me tied to a stake. I cannot fly, but bear like I must fight the course. What's he that was not born of woman? Such a one I am to fear or none. So Macbeth, he's had one prophecy disrupted, this whole Birnam would come to Dunsinane thing, but now he's throwing all his eggs into the basket of none of woman born can harm me. He's all in, all his chips on the table on that one prophecy. And so we see him come back to it again and again and again over these next couple of scenes. And so now young Siward enters, which of course we know we have old Siward, who's the general who's come up from England, who's supplying all the soldiers, and this is his son here. And so young Siward faces up with Macbeth. Macbeth gives him a couple of burns about his name and how he should be afraid, and young Siward's like, I won't be afraid, and Macbeth's like, well, I'll just kill you then. And he does. And so they fight. Siward is slain, and Macbeth, once again, he's coming back to it. Thou wast born of woman. Because, of course, he couldn't beat him. And so, like, hey, if you couldn't beat me and I killed you, then clearly this is just reinforcing this prophecy. But swords I smile at, weapons laugh to scorn, brandished by man, that's of a woman born. He's like, I have nothing to fear. And so Macduff comes in. Macduff at this point is just all about finding Macbeth. The battle, for all intents and purposes, is already won. So Macduff is less concerned with the kind of political implications of getting Malcolm reinstalled as king. That's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point. Now he's out for his personal revenge. And we see it here. Let me find him fortune, and more I beg not. Just bring me within my sword's length, Macbeth here. Okay. And so Siward and Malcolm have this little conversation here that, this way, my lord, the castle's gently rendered. We've already taken the castle. We've already won the battle. The tyrant's people on both sides do fight. The noble thanes do bravely in war. The day almost itself professes yours, and little is to do. We've pretty much already won. And Malcolm throws this out too. We have met with foes that strike beside us. They were expecting a bigger fight to be put up. But instead, people are like, oh, you're coming here to overthrow Macbeth? Okay, we'll fight with you. And so these foes, these people that they thought were going to be foes, are actually on their side. And so they go in and they take the castle. All right. On to the final scene. Okay. Macbeth, why should I play the Roman fool and die on mine own sword? Whiles I see lives, the gashes do better upon them. And it's kind of interesting when we come to this point because, Macbeth at this point has lost. And he has really nothing left to fight for. And there's this little question of you've already lost. Why don't you just kill yourself? And Macbeth's basically saying, that's not really my style. Whiles I see lives, the gashes do better upon them. Once again, he's going to take down as many as he can with him. And then, of course, Macduff comes on the scene. Turn, hellhound, turn. Oh, how far Macbeth has fallen since the beginning of the play. He's the hero, and now he's the hellhound. Of all men else, I have avoided thee. But get thee back. My soul is too much charged with blood of thine already. And so Macbeth, he's like, look, I've been trying to avoid you, and I've already murdered your entire family. Are you sure you want to go down with them? And Macduff, he's at the point where he's expended all words. I have no words. My voice is in my sword. Thou bloodier villain than terms can give thee out. So they fight. And Macbeth says, thou losest labor. You're just fighting in vain. As easy mayst thou the entrenchant air with thy keen sword impress me as make me bleed. Which is a lot of words to basically say you are about as good at injuring the air as you are at injuring me. Your sword can't touch me. Let fall thy blade on vulnerable crests, not his. I bear a charmed life, and here's a key line here. I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born. And so here he's bragging about this prophecy that's been made of him, and Macduff is like, well, thanks for telling me that, because here I'm going to get on my best Scottish accent for it. Despair thy charm, and let the angel which thou hast served tell thee Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. So, essentially, Macduff, he was a C-section baby, so he wasn't born of woman in the most thorough and traditional sense. And consistent with kind of the perception of C-section babies at the time, they weren't so much born to their mothers as much as they were born to the doctors or whoever it was that were pulling them out of the womb. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that mothers just simply didn't survive C-sections at that time. It was essentially a death sentence to have that particular procedure performed. And it kind of adds another degree of Macduff's tragic backstory. He's had his entire family murdered, and on top of that, we find that he grew up without a mom. So Macduff is really a tragic figure, and yet it's this tragedy that enables him to be the hero of the play. That spurs him on. The murder of his family is what spurs him to come and defeat Macbeth. And it's the tragedy of his birth and his childhood that is the undoing of Macbeth's prophecy that he has placed so much faith and misguided trust into as well. And so Macbeth, of course, is horrified by this. His entire world and belief system is falling apart. Cursed be that tongue that tells me so, for it hath cowed my better part of man. And be these juggling fiends no more believed. I can't believe the witches anymore, that palter us with double sense. There's a double meaning to all these prophecies that they've thrown at him, and he's only seen it in the single sense. That keep the word of promise to our ear, and break it to our hope. Once again, this sounds a lot like what Banquo was trying to warn him about all the way back at the beginning of the play. I'll not fight with thee, because of course at this point Macbeth knows that, well, if he was to fight with him, then he would die. And so Macbeth is like, I'm not going to fight, I'm just going to go away. So Macduff says, well, that's not really an option. Then yield thee, give up, coward. And notice, this is always what people do to get under Macbeth's skin. Call him a coward. And live to be the show and gaze of the time. We'll have thee as our rarer monsters are painted upon a pole and underwrit. Here may you see the tyrant. And so Macduff is basically saying, well, then this is going to be your living legacy. If you're just going to walk away, then you're going to be our prisoner, and we're going to show you off, and you're going to be the person who is going to be known forever as the tyrant. And that is how Malcolm is going to advertise you. And this gets under Macbeth's skin, because of course he doesn't want to be the coward, and he doesn't want to be below anybody. And so what does he respond with? I will not yield to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet, and to be baited with the rabble's curse. Though Burnham would come to Dunsinane, and thou opposed, being of no woman born, yet I will try the last. I'll fight till I can't any more. Before my body I throw my warlike shield. Lay on, Macduff, and damned be him that first cries, hold, enough. And those are Macbeth's last lines. I'm going to fight till the end, and damned be him that quits first. And that's not going to be me. And so they fight. Macbeth is slain, and Macduff exits carrying off Macbeth's body, and ultimately he's going to return back with his head later on. So, Malcolm and Seward arrive. Ross is there, and of course Ross, being the bearer of bad news most of the time in this play, comes to report that old Seward's son was slain by Macbeth. Seward is like, well, he died an honorable death, so everything's okay. And Malcolm is like, yep, that's true. Macduff comes back with Macbeth's head, and he says, well, here's the head. And so, of course, now that Macbeth is overthrown and slain, Malcolm is king. And so we come, whose voices I desire aloud with mine. Hail, King of Scotland. So hail, King of Scotland, Malcolm here. And so Malcolm then comes into to kind of say, well, this is going to be a little bit of a different era that we're going to usher in with me as king. We shall not spend a large expense of time before we reckon with your several loves and make us even with you, my thanes and kinsmen. Henceforth be earls. And of course, this is really kind of an updating of the title of thane. Like, the nobility is still the same. This is kind of reflective of Malcolm's time that he spent in England, that he's like, well, you're not going to be thanes. We're going to call you earls now. And of course, this is a title that has existed in England and Scotland among the nobility all the way up until the modern day. So in a sense, Shakespeare is kind of recognizing the ushering in of the modern kingdom, if you will. The first that ever Scotland in such an honor named. And so here he basically comes on saying, what's more to do, which would be planted newly with the time, as calling home our exiled friends abroad. So he's like, okay, well, I remember my old brother Donalbain, who's hidden away in Ireland. We'll bring him back, because Scotland is going to be a safe place again. Friends abroad that fled the snares of watchful tyranny, producing forth the cruel ministers of this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen, who, as 'tis thought, by self and violent hands took off her own life. So it's not like 100% confirmed that Lady Macbeth committed suicide, but it's largely suspected. This, and what needful else that calls upon us by the grace of grace, we will perform in measured time and place. So, thanks to all at once, and to each one whom we invite to see us crowned at Scone. And so, of course, everyone's going to Scone, the historical location where the kings of Scotland would be crowned and invested. And we've already seen this once with Macbeth, but now everything is set aright. The rightful heir to the throne is gone to be invested at Scone, and that is where we find ourselves at the end of the play. And the one thing now that I'll comment on at the end is, well, what about Fleance? What about that whole prophecy about Banquo's line and children becoming kings? Well, let's just remind ourselves that Malcolm has no heir right now. He's not married, doesn't have any children, and so while we don't see Fleance taking the throne at this point, we know that, well, Malcolm doesn't have a line of his own that's going to be king, and so that opens up the possibility for Fleance to become king, and thus to create his own line of kings after him. And so, in a sense, the prophecy is still left open-ended, But the main takeaway that Shakespeare's audience and that we can take away here as well is that everything is now set aright. That great chain of being has been restored. And that's where we find ourselves here at the end of Act 5 and the end of Macbeth. All right, folks. Well, thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful and useful to you. And yeah, we'll come back to it at a later time. Thanks again.